changed you in any way? I appreciate that your bereavement of your wife is obviously...
It's all mixed up in
Yes.
it. Yeah, I'd be telling lies if I didn't look at life differently now. Not that I was kind of naive and didn't think that I wasn't going to die sometime or whatever, but certainly after this year, I realised that life is very short and quite precious, and you've got to try and use it as best you can. And being the kind of person I am, which is a non-religious person, I've absolutely realised this is all you got, according to my beliefs.
Yeah.
So, it makes me very conscious to use it as best that I can, and to, not only do the work I do, but, to support the causes I believe in, etc. Because, and it's a scary thing to say, but all things going really well, even I still only have 10 or 15 years left, which is a very short time,
Sure. You mentioned the word remission actually several times, and it's a word, I suppose, that over the last number of years we tend to use as opposed to cure.
Yeah.
That this is something that... Had you heard of that word before?
I had, yeah.
And to you mentioned there, I suppose, longevity or things all going well. What's your understanding at the moment as to where the leukemia is? Or not is, as the case may be.
Yeah, well, as I say, I go in every 3 months and get a full blood count, and
this is in the hospital, not at your GP.
No, I go to the Mater, and then obviously the results are sent to Peter O'Gorman, and I go to see him, and he looks at me and said, Bloods are good, and then we start talking about art or politics or something else. So
you're still entrenched in the medical model in some way.
So so far so good. Everything seems to be fine, and I realise, not just from my treatment here, but from my experiences, which are kind of unique in that. About 4 years ago, I was approached by James D. Watson, the guy who discovered the structure of DNA, to do his portrait. And as a consequence of that, I don't know how it happened, but we've become really good friends. Now he's a lot older than me, he's 83. And I spent a holiday with him in Cold Spring Harbor, which is a cancer research institute in the United States, genetic research institute. And that's for me very interesting, because I know nothing about all of this, but in not just talking to him, but I've met there so many genetic researchers dealing with cancers by and large, and it's been a really interesting experience, because I don't know whether they are really good there and whatever, or it's the American way, but the optimism is quite extraordinary. They're of the view, many of them that I've spoken to, because apparently, the cutting edge of breakthroughs and everything are in the leukemias, are in the blood cancers, and you're talking to these very senior kind of researchers, and they're talking about 5 years we'll have it cracked, and you're saying, oh. And I met a relatively young man who was researching prostate cancer and was talking about major breakthroughs on the way and all, and you kind of come away saying that this whole thing is going to be sorted in a few years. They're so positive and so optimistic about breakthroughs and things like that, but none of them use the word cure. Cure is not part of the scheme, but effectively I would think that if what they're talking about is true, it is effectively a cure. Like if you get a particular cancer and you have an early enough diagnosis, the new remedies will stop it in its tracks, so it doesn't become a terminal illness.
Yes.
You just have to live with the state it's at when they deal with it,
And speaking of that, actually, it leads me to the next question in that, how do you construct the fact that you got leukemia and at this stage I haven't, but there are...
Well, there's no reason apparently.
Yes,
I mean, because, I asked Peter O'Gorman, I said, is this as a consequence of lifestyle choices or anything? And he said, no. I said, is it hereditary or anything? And he said, no. And I said, why? And he said, it's like, why does lightning strike one tree and not the other, And that seems, I don't know, that seems to be the thing,
And that's what makes leukemias that so much different in comparison to the obvious lung cancers if you smoke.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And it can be...
Because in one respect, I couldn't even sort of do the why me and get into that because, I don't drink to excess. I haven't smoked for 45 years or something, And I think, I live a reasonably healthy lifestyle. So, if I had got, one of the cancers associated with lifestyle, I'd be saying, how unfair. Why did I give up smoking? But there's none of that,
Sure.
It's just fate,
If somebody that you knew or not knew was diagnosed with a cancer or malignancy in the morning, what advice would you give them, Robert?
Well, I would say get the best person you can. I think I was lucky in that, it just all slotted into place. I wasn't kind of, worrying about have I the best person or have I not or whatever. Now, as it turned out, I think I've ended up with an excellent team of people dealing with me. But I would try and make sure you've got, the best person or people to deal with it. And once you're sure of that, to leave it to them to devise your treatment and how to deal with it. There is the terrible, frustrating thing in Ireland at the moment is the chaotic state of our healthcare system. So, in my case, it all seems to boil down to luck and chance. I have to say, so far, I have no complaints about my treatment within the Irish healthcare system. Now, I have to say, we've always had VHI, so I've had my care looked after and paid for largely, but not totally, by the VHI, etc. And yet Betty, who's also in the VHI, but because of the nature of her illness, she ends up having to go to Beaumont and not the matter private, for instance. The whole thing was a nightmare. And I think I was kind of caught on the hop because of this, because I kept thinking of my experience, which was it's the only time I've ever been in a hospital. Work went so well. I kept saying, it's going to start working now for Betty. And it never worked. The system failed her at every stage. So this is a frustrating thing, I think, for somebody who's, diagnosed with a serious illness. You can be confident maybe of, the individual people you're dealing with, but you're within a system that's basically dysfunctional,
Do you see any ways of improving it?
Oh, I think, of course there has to be ways, but it's root and branch and nobody has the bottle for that. Politicians in particular. I think, and we're veering into politics here, which we probably shouldn't, but I think the HSE is an utter disaster,
Okay. Well, that's your opinion.
Yeah.
I suppose in some ways, both of you it seems you both needed medical attention, but Betty seemed to be more acute or something that she needed to be in there, and then yours was more planned or something?
But also I just don't understand this business of, for instance, when I went down, sent by my consultant for my first chemo, I go in, I sit down, and the whole admissions procedure took half an hour, 3/4 of an hour. and after that I'm in a bed upstairs, you know. Betty was sent by her consultant to the A&E in Beaumont, because that's the only way you could be admitted. And this was a woman who was in considerable distress, and she was left sitting on a chair for 24 hours, you know.
Okay.
And then, you know, like, we've now got a system where you shout hooray when you get a trolley, you know, because that's an improvement of sitting on a chair.
Sure.
So she's on a trolley. Then she goes into a holding ward, which is not the system, you're not in the system still, and then finally gets in a ward. So you're days kind of hanging around the place. That's wrong. That's just...
It's very distressing for those that have to go through it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's right across the
Oh
board.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So like, so there's kind of luck involved with the illness you've got, where you're ending up going. Like, if for whatever reason I ended up, you know, in that situation, I mean, knowing me, I'd have walked out and died on the road rather than put up with that nonsense, you know.
Sure.
I mean, that was, you know, because I think I'm a fairly placid person up to a point, and then the problem is, after the point, I become very difficult and very unpleasant, you know. But I have to say about, you know, my whole care and treatment, I never once felt inclined to, you know, push the limits of losing my temper or getting annoyed or anything, you know. But I mean, I just found you know, with the experience with Betty exasperating, you know.
It sounds very stressful.
You know.
And to have such a sad outcome in the
Yeah.
very bitter, obviously.
Oh yeah, you know, it's terrible, you know.
You spoke about, I suppose, the professional position really that you would recommend to those that if they were having, or if they were diagnosed, that, you know, that to surround themselves with the best that they, you know, and have confidence in who you're. What would be the personal position, I suppose, that worked for you? You can obviously only go with your own philosophies but the position that you held psychologically during this time when you were diagnosed, if you were to advise someone, I suppose, what worked for you?
Well, I suppose one aspect of the whole thing was the fact that I have a kind of fatalistic attitude to life in general, you know. And I've never really, you know, although people think I've been very clever in doing this or that or the other, but it's all been kind of accidental, and you know, I've ended up doing things that, you know, have been successful that happened by accident or by chance, or somebody asked me to do it. I didn't sit down and plan a career or anything. It just happened by fate, really. So when all of this happened, I kind of had the same attitude, and thankfully in my case it all kind of seems to have worked out. You know, like, I didn't sit down, well, I suppose if I was very unhappy with some of the people that I'd encountered on my journey, I might have had to sit back and do something. Like, a friend of mine who happens to be very wealthy was diagnosed with prostate cancer, and for whatever reason he was very unhappy with the people that he went to here, who were the top people, but he just was not happy. So he had the money to start looking elsewhere, and he ended up having his operation and everything done in Stone Kettering in New York, and paying an absolute fortune, because private American healthcare is not cheap. Now, he was rich enough to make that choice, but obviously, like, if you're not rich, that kind of choice isn't there, you know, and that's difficult, you know. So
you're saying very much the systemic effect of the professionals that you interact with, be it, you know, be it from the consultant down to the team, down to the, you know, to the wider team, that profoundly affects how. Oh,
I think so. Yeah. I'm absolutely convinced of that, and I happen to think that, you know, for whatever reason, I mean, it all worked out fine for me, you know, but it could have gone wrong, you know. Somebody along the line might have sent me off to the A&E in Beaumont or something, you know.
I think you've had a difficult year, so it's nice that you have some reprieve.
Yeah.
Robert, thank you very much for again agreeing to take part in these diaries. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you.
Was that okay?
That's fine. If you're happy, I'm happy.
No, I'm very happy. Yeah, I was there. I have everything packed up. Like I was just saying, this is the longest time I haven't been in work I'm like 2.5 weeks off. Actually, it was 3 weeks on my honeymoon, but I'm nearly 3 weeks off on Wednesday.
Is this the first one, by the way?
Yeah. So hence the anxiety around it.
Oh, stop! Yeah. Oh, well, you know, it's doesn't matter how many you have. It's still a fairly serious adventure.
Oh yeah, no, and that's the thing. It's so.
The only thing I'll say from my experience is the first one is always late.
Yeah, that's.
But specialists will tell you that's not true. But in my experience, you know.
No, I think.
And if you dare to go a second time, it's very quick.
Yeah, your body's geared up for it. It's just such an unusual position to be in, knowing that it now has to come out and how that happens.
Oh, yeah.
And it's very.
It's
very, this anticipation is.
You know, it's when you kind of are close to it, you realise that, you know, and I'm a huge evolutionist and great believer in Darwin and all of that, but we kind of, as a species, I think we haven't got there in this yet.
Yeah.
It's not the most efficient way of procreating and continuing the species.
Well, they say ideally your incubation period, if you were to compare it to an animal, is that it should be in your body for 18 months.
Yeah.
Like that's the level in comparison to.
But just you see, I think we were so busy as a species trying to get erect and trying to walk. That we forgot that, you know, this all has to happen here, and we've constructed the human frame too narrow.
I'm very clear about what's to the forefront of my mind. Speaking of which, actually, have you ever gone to the Galapagos Islands or?
No.
Oh, we went there for our honeymoon.
Did you? Yeah. No.
Robert, if it's a trip.
Well, the nearest I've been to there, which is also a wildlife treat, is we went for a reasonably long holiday to Costa Rica.
Oh right, yeah.
And the rainforests there, just
yeah.
magnificent,
Yeah,
and just teeming with life. You know,
Yeah.
really marvelous. And I think again, like the Galapagos, they have lots of unique species for where they are. You know,
it's a wonderful thing to be around that kind of.
We've done it a few times. We went only a couple of years ago to Madagascar.
Oh, right.
And that was fascinating, you know. Now, I didn't realise when I booked it and everything, and I have to say it all went fine, you know, but that Madagascar is, I think, the poorest country in the world, and that's kind of rough. That I didn't like Antananarivo as the capital.
Okay.
Too much squalor and poverty and just unpleasantness, you know.
Yeah.
It was fine when we were out in the country and everything, you know, but I didn't like that, you know.
Yeah, my parents were in South Africa a couple of years ago, and I lived there for some time during studied in Cape Town, but again they went to very poor areas as well as.
It's
my
rough.
father found it very distressing because you just find he's a very giving man and just you know.
Well, we went to India a couple of times actually. And we weren't going to big cities, but we ended up in the big cities because you fly in there. And we were in Bombay for 3 days or so, and I just felt like, I mean, we were being brought to museums and places, and the car would stop at traffic lights and be just surrounded by little children all going outside, you know. And I always remember we were going on a boat trip to it's an island called Elefanta Island, which is, 20 miles off Bombay, or Mumbai as they call it now, where there's really interesting carved temples out of stone, you know. But so we were on the docks near, it's called the Gateway to India, which was built, it's a bit like the Arc de Triomphe, it was built to welcome one of the English kings, you know. So, like, it has its back to India and its nice side to the king arriving in the port. But anyway, we were just there, and I was standing there, and the next minute I felt a little pull on my trousers, and I looked down, and there was this little girl, completely naked. I would say 3, you know, years of age, and just going, and they say chapati, which is for the Hindi for bread,
yes,
you know,
yeah.
and she's going like this. And I looked at her and I said to Betty, will we take her?
Oh, I know, it's horrendous, isn't it? Yeah, it's very
and
distressing.
it's so vast. I mean, you know, even if you give some money, it's all pointless.
And who goes to,
yeah,
it was in Nepal, pens is what they wanted when you were trekking in Nepal, because they wanted to go to school and stuff, and I mean, the world is so...
Oh no, it's
diverse.
tough,
Yeah.
definitely.
Have you been to Angkor Wat?
No. I was in Vietnam a couple of years ago.
Did you like it?
Too many people.
Yeah, of all that loop, like Laos or Cambodia.
And I found, I mean, China's the same. Well,
I've never been there.
They followed the Chinese example. It's just too aggressively business, you know.
Oh, and it's very.
I mean, the people are nice, but they're under enormous pressure, you know.
I think it's so messed. Any of those, like even Cambodia, like that genocide. There's just so much underdog stuff, you know, that.
But I didn't realise that Vietnam, when the war finished, which was in the late 70s.
Yes.
The population of Vietnam was 40 million.
40, was it as much as that?
Do you know what the population of Vietnam is now?
I'd say is, oh God, double, I'd say, no, what
90.
is it? 90, yeah. Oh, it's just
packed.
yeah, no, it's...
And the other thing I hadn't realised, you know, because, you know, like they had this war of liberation and all of that, so you imagine that there's going to be something progressive about the society.
Nothing.
Horribly